Good morning. This is Carl Dakin, and this is the Successful Funding Show. For those of you who are new to this live stream presentation, this is a weekly show put on by myself, Carl Dakin, the Capital Coach, to talk about all kinds of issues related to funding. And in that regard, we have, as a live stream, the potential for members of our audience to participate in the program, and we invite you to do so. So with that, I'm going to introduce my guest, Lucas Marquardt with Precision Financial. And the topic of today is hard-headed thinking. And I'll put it in this framework. Occasionally, or maybe more often than not, we will be working with someone as a consultant, advisor, or coach who comes into us and says, "This is what I'm going to do." And the immediate thought is, that's not the right choice. You've got other options, better options, or you're reaching too high over your head, or it needs a little more thought, or any number of other reactions to that. And it presents an interesting challenge. So Lucas, I'll let Lucas introduce himself, and then we'll kind of jump into this question and talk about it because we, as people who advise and coach people, our goal is get our clients to do what we think is the right path. Not that we know everything or we're perfect or we even are clear on what the right path is, but it may be easier to say we know they're on the wrong path. So with that, Lucas, give us a little background on yourself and what you do for a living, and then we'll jump into our topic of today.
Well, good morning, Carl. Great to be back with you. My name is Lucas Marquardt. I am a fractional CFO or oftentimes a consulting CFO for small to mid-sized businesses and other organizations. I've had some role in this nature for the last 25 years. And so I've seen quite a bit, not as much as you have, Carl, but absolutely seen different clients in different situations. And as much as we want to help them, sometimes it's hard to help them help themselves.
Yeah, and the reference to me, seeing more than you, another aspersion on my age. So when you get as old as I am, Lucas, you'll have seen as much as I have. Um, it's an interesting perspective because a lot of times, as a small business owner, you get locked into your own paradigm of, this is my world. I'm doing everything I can to make it work. But that situation you're in doesn't necessarily give you the high vantage point that you may get as a client, as a coach or consultant, because when you have worked with dozens, if not hundreds, of different businesses, you've been through the drill many, many, many times. You get to see a lot of things that don't work. You get to see things that might work that the other person is not familiar with. Your client's never seen or heard of it before. I was sharing information yesterday on a approach to raising funding called revenue share, which has been around a long, long time. It's getting a little bit more popularity within the crowdfunding world, but it's not that common across the entire capital industry. So I was kind of backpedaling, going, I know all about this, but how do I quickly, immediately convey to this person why this is an option and why it has advantages? And so I sent him an example of what I was doing. I gave him a Wikipedia link. And then I found an article that got down to comparing equity with debt with RevShare and sent those all out. And I'm hopeful that this is the first of, I will call it a reveal about, well, here's a new way to do something you may not be aware of. And oh, by the way, a lot of people think that a person in your situation, a company in your situation, this is probably the best path. It may not be, but let's dig into that. So, Lucas, when somebody walks in your door and their mind's already made up, what's your first step?
Well, I think it's first important to acknowledge that small business owners have lots of different advice coming to them from different places. Their friends, their family, other business owners, TV, the internet. There's so much information out there that they're getting information from. And when those small business owners are awake at night, worrying about their business and thinking about their next step, they're reading and consuming all this information. So I think it's always been my approach that I don't know it all, and I'm just another one of these voices that come to them with advice. I've always found that it's important to really understand how they've arrived at where they are, who they're listening to, what they've been told, what they believe. And with anybody, if you're telling them straight off the bat that what they believe is not true or not right, usually doesn't garner a real positive response. That said, I believe that listening to them and talking to them and really understanding how they got to where they are is a good place to start the conversation, and interjecting different case studies and almost thoughts as you were talking about it. Have you thought about revenue share? Have you heard about this? What do you know about that? It allows them to share what they believe is an authority in the space, but also gives them kind of the ground to say, well, what do you think? And at that point, I believe that's when the door opens for you to provide the advice that you have. And then lastly, we come from different areas of expertise that our small business clients typically do not have. Yours is legal and entrepreneurship and a dozen other things, and mine is financial and numbers and all the things that most people don't really want to understand. And I find that we have to slowly educate them and help them understand the basics without trying to drown them in the knowledge that they don't have or make them feel insecure about the knowledge that they don't have, but eventually come to the table as a trusted advisor and not another source of information.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting approach. I'm going to recognize a person who's entered our audience this morning, the Don. We started calling him the Don yesterday in recognition of his great wisdom on LinkedIn Live, and his willingness to share that information with myself and a number of other people. Don provides expert services as a consultant to other businesses, such as my own. And yes, us coaches and consultants also need our coaches and consultants to help us develop our strategy and improve our operations. So, Don, thanks for being with us this morning. Lucas, it sounds like what the first thing you do is you try to kind of dig deep into how the client got to where they're at, which can help understand. If you find out it was their cousin Eddie who gave them the bad information, you may be able to break that recommendation down pretty quickly. Whereas if they read it on the internet, where we know everything on the internet is true, it may be a longer effort to try to get them to change their mind. And then from there, your second step is to kind of ask them, what were they thinking? How did they get to choosing this particular option? Because at the end of the day, it's going to be their decision. And whether they change their mind or they just modify it a little bit, it's still going to be their decision. This is one of the hard parts about being a coach, is watching a client do something that you think is wrong and crossing your fingers that you were either right and they don't mess it up so bad, or you were wrong and they were right to start with, because you don't want to see them fail. And then the third part is you start getting into the basics that should support whatever decision was made. So if they're trying to raise funding, are they thinking through the basics of raising funding? If they're looking at putting in an accounting system, or they're talking about their communication systems, these all have what I think a lot of people would call generally recognized truths or accepted norms, best practices that are there. It is one of my challenges is that a lot of the best practices recognized in raising money are wrong. And so I'm in a constant state of attack on almost everything that comes out of the media or particularly out of TV. But if we get them working with the basics and talking through it, then at that point, you have the ability to start inserting alternatives. It says, well, have you considered this or looked at that? And if you did, why or why not did you go down that path?
Mm-hmm. I think I'm in a good spot because accounting and finance are pretty well documented in terms of best practice and how it's generally accepted accounting principles and all those different things. When it comes to an area such as raising capital or many other small business practices, it's really depends on who they've been talking to. And we both know that small business owners hate not having an answer and will scramble until they have an answer of some sort, and will hold on to that answer because that's what settles the voices in their head about what they're going to do with their business the next day. And so when you first meet a client, you have to accept that you're just another person that they're going to pitch their idea or rationale to, just like they have everybody else, their banker, their wife, their husband, whoever it may be, that they've tried to convince that their idea is the best idea. You're just another person in that line. So you have to understand that and take yourself out of that role and help, instead of standing across from them, stand next to them. And I think if you can visually have that conversation in your head before you talk to your client, the conversation you have with that client will be different from any conversation they've had prior to meeting you.
Yeah, I agree. I always talk about the metaphor of I want them on my side of the table, not across the table. I don't want to be in a confrontive, combative, where it's my idea versus your idea. That's not where we're at. As a coach, you have to be conveying constantly that you are acting in the best interest of your client. And that includes occasionally bumping heads with them when they start to go a direction you think is incorrect. But you can't get to the outcome that you hope to get to if they get adversarial, if they start locking down everything and going to DEFCON 5 and not allowing any new ideas into their head. So yeah, you have to approach this very gently. And what I've found also is that quite often, us being an entrepreneur myself, is that we sometimes grab a hold of something way too quick as an idea, going, wow, that sounds better than what I was doing. I'm going to go do this. But there isn't any real, I'll call it analysis. There isn't any strategy development. It's just jumping from one rock to the other to try to get across the creek. And without asking ourselves, is that really a rock, or is that wet or slippery, or do I have on the right boots? All the things that might prepare us to have a higher, more successful transition from where we're at to where we want to go. But the first thing we got to do is we got to stop them from taking the leap and take some time to consider the alternatives. And to do that, they've got to be willing to listen to us and set aside the time, which is hard to do when you're in a hurry or you're behind schedule. You're saying, if you don't mind, take a half a day and not do something and step back and take a look at this from a different angle. So how do you gain that trust to begin with?
Well, Carl, I love your analogy because I personally have taken that leap onto that slippery rock or in the wrong boots, and I've done it with clients too. And I've learned from those experiences that the planning stage of any of these engagements, whether it's raising capital, whether it's going in and cleaning up your finances or coming in, putting together a financial strategy for growth, the planning stage is so important. The information stage is so important. When we talk to a business owner and they want to do X, Y, and Z with them as the next step of their business, it is important to implore them to consider the exit, which is years from now, hopefully. But then how does that track back to this next step that they're looking to take? And I think that when we talk to clients and we raise that topic of to take them out of the present day and into the future, it all of a sudden opens up a whole new perspective on the steps that they're looking to take in their business. Is what you're doing today or what you're planning to do conducive to the exit you want to have? Well, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. Well, let's talk about that, because that's going to help us really plan how you take the next step, because we don't want this next step, which seems right in the moment now, to somehow complicate your eventual exit. So I think with that, back to your question about gaining trust, when we demonstrate to the client that we are interested in their best interest is what we have in mind, and that we're willing to step out of the current day and look at the eventual exit, that tells them that we're thinking about them as a person and not just the business that they're trying to run.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. All too often in funding, everybody's talking about the next raise or today's raise. And more common than not, you go, well, how's that going to impact the following raise, which may not have even been on the table as a concept. But better yet, as you put it, is where do you want to go with your business? What is your ultimate goal? If this is a lifestyle business and you intend to do this for the next 5, 10, 50 years, then you may want to choose a different path than what you're currently thinking about. And if you are bound and determined to get out in the next 3 to 5 years and do an exit from your business, then there are other things which are probably different from a lifestyle business that need to be started today in order to be ready tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And creating that long-term strategy, putting today's actions in the perspective of all the other actions that may follow it for a long, long time, is really something every client needs to do, because it gives them a better focus, a better perspective. They can look at today from today, and they can look at today from way down the road tomorrow. And from those two different directions, it's easier to tell if this is a good action or a bad action, or we don't know kind of a thing, because we don't always achieve crystal ball accuracy in thinking what we're going to do. But I think, as you stated it, by taking them out of today's immediate crisis and looking at it long term, and looking at it from their standpoint, that helps them understand that you are there to help. You are considering everything that's on the table, whether they know it or not, or have been thinking about it or not. But you get away from any concern that you're there just to grab some money or just to build some time, or any of the other negatives all too often associated with being a consultant.
Mm-hmm. From where I sit, I always try to convey to my client that the financial strategy supports the larger and the other strategies of the business. You can't lead the planning for a business with a financial strategy, because in the absence of everything else, a financial strategy is make more money and put more in my bank account. Well, yes, but how does a financial strategy support your overall goal to, as you said, create a lifestyle business, create an absentee owner business, create a business that you scale and sell? There's so many different scenarios that are possible there, but you have to start with now. And we do a lot of financial modeling to display to clients how the numbers support that strategy, or sometimes do not support that strategy. And so, but that's, and I think, an essential part of the planning stage that allows them to really see if, the parts are going to come together in the numbers.
Yeah. I was on a show yesterday with a member of my LinkedIn cohort on Don Cohen's show, and we were talking about the word success and measuring, what is success? And success, like a lot of other words, has an infinite number of meanings. It means something different to me than it does to you, and certainly to my client. And so part of this questioning, this interrogation that has to take place is to try to find out if the client has defined what is their success, so that it serves as kind of a North Star or a common point of reference for everything that we're trying to do in the planning stage, because sometimes it just there is no target. Small business owners, entrepreneurs, more often move forward without a well-defined goal. When I ask commonly my client, I says, "What is your goal?" I get something like, "I want to be rich," or "I want to be better," or "I don't want to worry about paying my bills anymore." Something very amorphous, very vague, and you're going, "That's all nice, but how do I know when we get there?" Is if I'm standing here on the sidelines, I don't have a line running across the racetrack that tells me when the horse is going to come across the line. I would like this level of definition to enter into our conversation. I want you to tell me, do you need $1 million by the time you turn 55 or 35 or 45, or what is it that is going to be your measure of success? And again, as we described earlier, you may have to step through this conversation in a series of stages to make sure that we're all using the same terms, we all understand what they mean. And this is where I really like to get down to what I call measurable goals, so that we don't have any confusion, any misdirection, any misunderstanding about what they want to do. Uh, but with that, if we're now talking to them about options, then we also have an ability to do compare contrast. So how do you get a client looking at option A, option B, uh, all those kinds of things?
Well, I think that developing the options is based on your skill set and experience. If you've seen different scenarios with different clients and you're able to provide hypothetical scenarios in possibly an order of likelihood, I think it's important to draw to paint those pictures for the client and help them weigh in on which one of those options is or are most attractive to them. Um, we've often heard from clients that their goal is to become an entrepreneur so that they can work less. Well, that usually isn't a real likely option. That doesn't happen very often. However, you have people that want to be entrepreneurs, and they think that the only way to become an entrepreneur is to start a business. Well, there's we know the statistics on starting businesses; they aren't great. However, entrepreneurship through acquisition is a field where there is ample opportunity. And that is, for example, it's a great alternative option for them to look at. You want to start a new business and take all that risk, or buy one that's already operating and improve on it. So again, laying out the options based on what you've seen in your experience is what makes your experience valuable to the client, and not and doing so in a way that you're not telling them that what they think is wrong, but to offer them some other alternatives that they should consider. Whether they do consider is a whole different story.
Well, we'll get to that in a moment. So, yeah, and it is part of where I want to go with today's program, because we will have clients who are fixed in their mindset, and we feel a need in their own best interest to move them out of that mindset. But yeah, I sometimes will put on the table additional options, where I'm putting them out there, not because I necessarily believe or advocate for those options, but I'm trying to get my client to look at things from a different perspective. It's like, well, if this happens, we go through in funding, you have to put out a statement of risk, things that can go wrong that are going to take you off of your path, slow you down, or even kill your business. And sometimes I walk people through that. It's not a fun thing to do, but you go, well, what if we had a pandemic? Well, 6 years ago, that wasn't big on our horizon. And prior to 9/11, what about a terrorist attack on the United States? How would that impact your business? And I had a couple businesses go down. They failed as a consequence of the terrorist attack. And we suddenly had one more thing to worry about that we should be thinking about. And a lot of times the small businesses, I'm just surviving day to day. I can't really get into the big picture. I can't get into that. But I like to give them some alternative good things and some alternative bad things to think about, to show them that they're nothing's certain. Things can go wrong, do go wrong, and at the same time, if they go right, are you prepared to work with that as well? I was talking to a client last night where um, they're trying to get their first sales done. They've got one, they're working on number two. I said, that's all fine and good, but what if you get 100 leads that come in the door tomorrow? How are you going to handle that? And they're smiling because yes, come on down. We'd love to have 100 sales. And I'm going, no, you don't, because you don't have any infrastructure in place. You don't have your staff in place. And you're going to make a lot of potential customers unhappy. You're going to blow up a bunch of sales. So how do you go about trying to um, frame this from the standpoint of getting your customer out of the mindset they're in, out of the rut they're thinking, or however you want to describe it, but instead of there's a one way, there's multiple ways?
Well, the term that comes to mind is best laid plans, right? Um, we always try to help clients understand that you can't plan your way out of any all eventualities. Business is, especially small business, is fraught with variables and surprises, and the aptitude that a client has to have for that landscape is pretty important. You can't bulletproof yourself from all the different things that are going to happen. So, but what we can do is we can talk about risk. We can talk about how to de-risk certain situations. And much of that happens in the planning stage, but not all of it. So, and some of these risks can be managed, and some of them are ones you just have to take. And but again, a client that feels that you're standing by their side as they're going through this process will feel more confident, especially if you can show them the numbers or the case studies or the relevant guidance that helps them achieve that confidence is huge. And that's where they're not just relying on you for the things that you're saying and the guidance you're providing, but you're also showing them what else is out there and where else they can learn. And through your endorsement or provision of these resources, it provides them with some of the confidence they need to venture through this perilous landscape.
Yeah. So we have another guest with us this morning, Harvey Tuck. Harvey's a member of my cohort, and Harvey's involved in franchising. So just a few minutes ago, Lucas was mentioning that if you want to be an entrepreneur, one of your options is to start your business from scratch. And that means with absolutely nothing. It's kind of like a one of those Survivor TV shows where they throw you in the desert and they go, oh, sorry, no water, no food, figure it out for yourself. That's actually very, very close to a startup entrepreneurship effort, where you're sitting there going, what did I do? How did I get into this mess? One of the options or alternatives to starting from scratch is to buy an existing business. And there are all kinds of boomers, people my age, who are coming to the end of their career and they don't have anything lined up or anyone lined up to take over that business for them. Some may end up selling it to their employees. Some may still be successful in selling it to someone else. But this is an opportunity for someone to step into a business where they've already worked out a lot of the front end details. It doesn't mean that this business isn't going to be hard or it isn't going to have its own challenges, but it's a way of avoiding that. Harvey works with franchises where it's another way to get into a business, and that is to work with a franchisor, someone who's already created a template for a particular type of business. In this case, Harvey works with coffee shops. And instead of saying, well, where do I get this and where do I get that and how do I do that? You work with a franchisor, you become a franchisee, and they give you basically a playbook that says, here's how I go about running this business, and here's your suppliers, and here's what it should cost. And take a lot of these unknowns off the table so that, again, you've got a bit of a head start, a little bit of traction instead of trying to start all over again. So Harvey says, good here to be here with you, Carl. I'm fantastic to meet you, Lucas. Looking forward to learning and sharing. Harvey puts on his own show on franchising on both Tuesdays and Thursdays, but not this week because I heard that Harvey's taking his youngest son to his first day of college and doing the orientation. So doing a proper balance of work and life. And cheers to you. Lucas's kid is still just this big, so he's got a way to go before he gets to college. And mine graduated so long ago, I almost can't remember which colleges they went to, but that's also a good thing. So we're at a point where we've now talked to our client, we've understood where they've come from. We've put some alternatives on the table so we can kind of gauge what got them to where they're at in their thinking, and hopefully started opening their mind to looking at this from different alternatives. And yet, for whatever reason, our client has reached this threshold where they're going, nope, this is the way we do it, and we're gonna go forward with this. And you're looking at their proposed plan of action and you are going, this isn't going to work.
I think to be successful in a role as a consultant or a coach or an advisor, you have to be comfortable with the possibility that you may have to refer them elsewhere. Whether the road that they want to take requires different expertise or a different personality, or it's just not something that you want to be involved with. For me, with any of my engagements, I have a fiduciary duty to the shareholders and I can't take on different situations that compromise that duty. And I have, morals that guide me in where I want to be. So when that situation presents itself, I'm more than happy to advise them or show them other resources that might be able to help them. And their decision is more power to them, but you have to be comfortable knowing that you can't solve all the problems that come to your door.
I learned early in my career, if somebody was not taking my advice, it probably was not going to be a long-term relationship. That somewhere here along the way, they're going to do something that put themselves out of business, which then all I can do is go to the business funeral and say a few prayers over the business. Or more likely, we're going to have a little bit of a confrontation because I will try to guide them in the direction they want to go. And if they fight back, now we're starting to tear down the relationship, the trust that I've created with them. And so there's a point where, as you put it, you have to acknowledge this is not working and you're going to have to step away. Now, sometimes you can hand them off to somebody else who might either have a different idea or agree with what they're trying to do. You may find someone who has a specialized area of expertise that might be more appropriate, like bringing in that neurosurgeon for that special surgery that's required. But in most cases, you're basically just going to have to step away and move on because you've done what you can do. You've brought to their attention that there are alternatives and you think they're taking the wrong path. And if they don't choose that, you may be able to survive that decision. You may not.
And it goes both ways too. I mean, I've been fired by many clients, and not because I don't know what I'm doing. It's because they have a different mindset, and that's fine. I think it's important as a consultant or a coach to be authentic and to stand on what you believe and convey that to the client at all times, and not try to avoid saying things just to make them happy, because in the end that doesn't work for anybody. And so that may not be congruent with what they want or what they believe, and that's fine. They may terminate the relationship for that as well. Many times I've told clients after the fact, hey, if there's anything I can help with, let me know. We don't have to be working together. I want to be helpful. But if it comes to a situation where I can't be helpful and I'm not adding value, whether I step away or they ask me to step away, that is a fact of life. Then when it comes to this environment that we live in.
You bring up a very interesting point about being extremely careful not to say stuff just to make your client happy. I've had a number of advisors who, for all the wrong reasons, decided that they wanted to tell me what I wanted to hear instead of telling me the truth. And we ended up, kind of like in the wrong place at the wrong time with nothing to show for it. And looking backwards, you go, well, how did we get here? Because I thought we were going this way, and you told me we were, like you're holding the compass or the map, and actually we were going in the wrong direction, and you never said anything. And the part of the problem there is that if the client is relying upon you and you failed to give them good advice, shame on you. But if the client thinks that you took them off in the wrong direction, they're going to be unhappy with you. You may even get into an element of liability where you're going, well, they're paying you good money and you didn't give them any advice. Maybe you're at fault for their failure along the way. Mm-hmm. And I've had a number of clients who, despite not paying attention to what I said, still wanted to come back and blame somebody, for their failure. And if you were the last consultant they talked to, then they're going to come back and go, well, why didn't you tell me not to? I said, well, I told you about 3 times. In fact, here's my email. Here's the date we had this conversation. Here's the stuff I told you not to do. And you went ahead and did it anyway. And they still think that somehow you should have stopped them from doing what they thought they did. And you're like, okay, this person is not being accountable for their own decision making, and they're dangerous people. They will always find somebody else to blame. They will often engage counsel trying to figure out how to get money back from you or make some claim, that, hey, I want my fees back because you didn't keep me from self-destruction. As a consultant coach, you also have to kind of be watching your client all the time to see if they have these bad practices or this sense of it's always somebody else's fault, so that you don't get drugged down into a black hole with them.
Absolutely. I think we've all known somebody who is quick to blame somebody else or will never accept responsibility for their own actions. And if you choose to work with somebody like that, you inevitably become that one of those people that they lay blame on. And I think that we need to understand those personality types and be able to identify them in the get-go, so that we either choose not to engage with them or to engage with them with guardrail. Because you can have, some of the most successful people in the world are of these personality types, but they're not people you want to work with. They're not people you want to be involved with. And sometimes they're not even people you want to be friends with.
Yeah. No, that gets into another element, maybe a topic for another day, is how friendly should you be with your client? Because too much friendship may dull the edges on a sharp criticism that needs to be leveled at the client and going, you're screwing up, you need to quit. And I'm trying to be as blunt as I can because I don't think you heard the last three warning signals I gave to you. So I'm trying to stop you from going off the edge of the cliff today. And that gets very, very hard to get to that point. So when you have somebody comes along and you're leaning on your client a little too much because they're paying your bills because you're a consultant, you're charging fees. How do you resist? I will say the temptation to just kind of go along with the story.
So, one of the first things I tell all of my clients is if you have a finance person, CFO, finance director, anybody in that space who is saying yes all the time, you probably have the wrong finance person. Finance is not about saying yes. Finance is about saying yes, but or no, because ultimately the numbers don't. We deal in a situation where the numbers will not support any reality. It's a math equation. So we have to be able to advise our clients based on what the math says, and oftentimes that requires a no. And I think that kind of sets the stage for many clients that they understand why we take what may be perceived as a pessimistic stance on it, but in fact, we're looking out for them. We're looking out for them as business owners. We're looking out for the money that they've invested in their business. We're looking out for their future, and that's our responsibility. And we feel that that's a very important part of what we do.
Yeah, I remember early in my career when I was wearing my legal hat most of the time. I was engaged in a piece of litigation where my representative with my client had no prior experience in anything, and I couldn't typically say enough bad things about that person as things went on. But he one day was basically getting my client riled up that we weren't pushing this case forward hard enough. And so I went out and got a project management chart, and I laid out all the tasks that needed to be done. And I put it up on the wall in the boardroom, and it took up an entire wall. And I said, this is where we're at today, and this is where I'm being told we need to be in 3 weeks. And if you look at this chart, each of the people on my team will need to put in 300 hours that week alone for us to accomplish all the tasks that we're supposed to be doing. And that's assuming that the other side, who was being ultra non-cooperative, works along with us on making these things happen, because some of this stuff is dependent upon them giving us information and discovery. We can't get there from here. And it kind of diffused the situation where we were trying not to poke an eye in the person who was telling us how we were supposed to be doing our job, even though they had no knowledge of how to do that. But we were trying to educate them to some degree, softly, without trying to make them out to be the bad guy, that they should shut up and sit down and let the experts in the room take care of the problems. And so there are always going to be moments where you have to almost get in the face of your client and explain to them that this is no longer soft advice. This is kind of the breaking point where I'm going to make a proposal to you what I think you should do. If you decide not to adopt my recommendation, then, as you described it, Lucas, it's time to say so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen. We're going to go a different direction here, because I have seen clients pointed to their own destruction by their own actions, and it seems like there's nothing you can do to stop them.
I have a professional mantra that is, I am not the problem, nor am I the solution. And I think any consultant or coach that goes in there thinking that they're the solution to the client's problems it's the wrong mindset. We're there to help them figure out the solution to their problem, but we're not the problem that they're trying to solve. And I think that, that you talking about soft advice becoming hard advice is really important, because you have to have professional integrity to be able to say, this is my advice. This is what I think you should do. And they may try to sell you and try to change your mind so that your proposal or your advice to them changes. But having the professional integrity based on your experience and what you believe is important to stand your ground. Now, if they bring new information to the table, then that may change things. But you have to you always have to give your client the best advice that you believe to be the best advice for their situation, even if it's not what they want to hear.
Yeah, so I've got another question here, which is going to be a little bit more challenging. So the client comes to you and says, "I want to take this action," and this, it turns out, and this happens to me a lot, is there. I look at this action, I'm going, "Huh, interesting. I've never done that before. I may not know anyone who's ever done that before. This might be both an opportunity or a disaster. It depends upon how the outcome comes about. And so, how do you handle it when a client suggests doing something that you have no idea how the outcome is going to be?"
Well, most of the time, at least with you and I, we own our own businesses. We are our own business owners, and we have to look at that as through a cost benefit analysis as owners of our own business. I'm fortunate enough to have some really smart people around me, Carl, you being one of them, that I've often turned to for advice, and have really, done my own research in terms of answering that question. I believe that the world presents you with opportunities at every step. You don't have to take those opportunities, but you need to be open to examining them. And if something that a client presents to you is interesting and compelling, it's worth taking a look at. But it's also a situation where you have to protect yourself first as the owner of your business.
Yeah, I think this might be a topic that we should get into on another day. The whole idea of the unknown, because there's a lot of different elements to how do you look at a new opportunity without necessarily taking too much risk or whatever. But I work with a lot of clients who have a brand new technology. They're inventors, innovators. Sometimes they're hard equipment type of things. In other cases, it's just a different way of doing business. And sometimes these I'll say they get a vision in their head that might be true under a specific set of conditions, which has not yet happened. And we're trying to get out our crystal balls and do a little futuristic forecasting here to say, how do I get this person to look at this realistically? Is this something within their competency, their capability of doing today? All these questions start coming up because we've moved from something where there may be a well-defined set of best practices to something that we just don't know. And yet the client is convinced that this is the path for them to go.
I think when you're talking to the client, it's almost important to test them in a way that you are asking them questions about that start with words like, have you considered, is this something you've looked at? Does this seem like something, to kind of test to see where they're at personality wise, mindset wise, flexibility wise, competency wise. Because if they're not willing, or they haven't been able to understand or look at other options or even alternatives that shouldn't even be options, but at least they haven't taken that into consideration, I think that tells you a lot about what your relationship with them is going to be like going forward when you're providing advice that you feel is the best and viable, and they don't.
There's there's a term we use in the consulting business on whether a client is coachable. Um, can they change their mind? Are they willing to look at what you're going to put on the table? Are they going to listen to anything you say? Or are they talking to you like they're checking the box and they're really not going to follow any of your advice anywhere, anytime? And it is something that I will say that I very early, even in the engagement process of looking and talking to a new client, I will put in a number of intentional questions to see just how fixated they are on who they are and what they're doing and how they're going about it.
Mhm.
Because if they have already mapped out their life in a step-by-step regimen that does not allow for any deviation from the path, there's really not a whole lot of purpose for me even starting the engagement and providing advice, because I'm I'm really superfluous to what they're going to do, and I'm not going to bring value. And it already presents a question: if I'm not bringing value, then why am I doing this? And why are they hiring me? Harvey has made another comment here, which is absolutely, Carl, you are right about opportunities to move a business to passive income of an inheritance or traditional sales is not appropriate. Um, this is an interesting comment, trying to fit it into our prior conversation. But one of the things that I have found that most small businesses have not done is they have not planned the end of their business, whether it's the business themselves or it's the owner operators come to the end of their career, whether you call it retirement or call it something else. Somehow there seems to be this mindset that once a business gets started, it's going to just move on indefinitely. And yet I see businesses as temporary responses to market opportunities. I've been around long enough to see businesses come and go, the fix and flips, and all these are legitimate business models, but they're very, very short duration compared to a lifestyle business, which is supposed to take you to retirement. But if your retirement's dependent upon you selling your business to someone else, you need to start planning and preparing for that way in advance of the date that you want to exit the stage, take your bow, listen to the applause, and leave the arena, because this requires more planning, preparation, and additional activities to go into that. So, Harvey, thank you for that question, because it presents more things that should be in the overall plan, the overall strategy that we don't get to.
I couldn't agree more. I have never worked harder than I have with clients who have done no planning for an exit and now all of a sudden have an opportunity to sell their business. And whether it's cleaning up the books or, going through sell-side due diligence, whatever it may be, all of a sudden it becomes this fire drill, and it never turns out the way that it should for the business owner. And so converting or envisioning a way that exit becomes passive income for the business owner. Perhaps they've owned the business for 40 years and they they have the ability to get creative with their exit if they plan far enough in advance to achieve that exit. Otherwise, it's completely reactionary, and they don't usually get what they want.
And unfortunately, a lot of times the exit from a business is not of your own making. As I get older and I see my fellow entrepreneurs, so to speak, exit voluntarily or involuntarily due to health, illness, not necessarily their own, somebody in their family, some other combination of circumstances. And you're going, well, this is kind of like a emergency plan for when a hurricane hits your house or something like that. You need to have a plan in place and be ready to pull the trigger on it when a condition occurs that it represents a need to make this major change in your life. And all too often it's not prepared for or planned for. We have another question from Zach Dane, who last week was a guest in the audience. I referred to Zane instead of Zach Dane, so apologies on that, Zach. Says, thank you for hosting. And have you had someone be, I'm going to say it's too confident or so confident on their idea that it turns off investors? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. And not just investors, but also consultants. Okay. If someone walks in the door and says, I have a new way to slice bread and it's better than anything that's ever been done before, I immediately start thinking this person's not got a good grasp on reality. And it may be they're correct. And that needs to be verified, validated, but that may be a situation that can only be validated in the real world, in the marketplace, with customers and everything else that happens. And so the problem is that someone who expresses a high level of confidence, particularly when they're doing something new or has not been done before, or has been done this way before, everyone who's been through my drill, Lucas, myself, where we've worked with businesses, our own businesses and other businesses, we've had our failures. We know things can go wrong. In fact, we know things will go wrong. The successful entrepreneur is the one who overcomes those things. And when somebody comes across with a statement that indicates that they see nothing wrong can potentially happen, that whatever they're proposing is inevitable, it's got to be a success, then it doesn't sound like they're taking into consideration all the things that can go wrong. When I pitch an idea to someone that is a little more radical or extraordinarily new and novel and unique, I present it as a supposition. I think this may work. This is why I think it may work. And I'm automatically turning on all the receivers because as soon as my mouth quits moving, I want to listen as hard as possible to the response of the person on the other side. And some people come back, oh, it'll never work. And I discard those automatically. That I work to the middle. So Lucas, how do you handle that situation?
I've used the analogy with my clients that, if the business goal you're trying to achieve is a house you're trying to get into, and you only see yourself walking in through the front door of that house, and that's the only way it's going to happen, you're not likely to be successful. But if you approach that situation that when the front door is locked, and you find a window or a back door or basement window that all of a sudden gets you to where you need to be, that's what makes you a successful entrepreneur, because you're confronted with a problem where your initial outlay doesn't work, your initial thought doesn't work. You're creative and thoughtful enough to come up with different approaches to achieve that goal. That indicates to me that you're going to be a successful entrepreneur or a successful business person. Being confident is important. Being confident and hard-headed and not open to the input that you're being given is not a recipe for success.
Right. Yeah, I think that if you approach any investor with an idea, first off, you should be talking to them about how it may help them, which is an uncertainty in and of its own right. You don't know that the investor is going to either get rich in an ROI or gain some secondary or primary benefit outside of the investment. And so this is more like a proposal. It's more like a theory that has yet to be proven. And then as you listen to the person, you were trying to convey back to them that you understand that this is not a certainty, that you are agile on your feet, as Lucas said. Lucas is, of course, going around trying the windows. Me being a little less patient, I might have just picked up a rock and broken the window to get inside. Which still gets us inside. We're still problem solving, but now we got to go fix the window later. So Lucas is being good with the money, or I might have been a little more risky. But it's very important to convey that you are a thoughtful person and cognizant of all the things that can go wrong, knowing that you don't know everything. So you're cognizant of what you know can go wrong, and you're also sensitive to the things that might go wrong that you don't know about. And anytime you start a business, it's an experiment that may or may not be successful, despite your best efforts, because the towers may come down because terrorists did that, or somebody on your team caught COVID, or like they say, what if you got run over by a bus? And I haven't had a bus, but I've had 2 DUIs with fatalities of my clients over my career, where somebody was in the groove and ready to go, and then the next day, one of the key members of the team was no longer with us. So these things can go wrong, and they can be extreme, and they can be fatal to the business, if not to the individual. So somehow you have to convey your enthusiasm. You have to share your idea in a positive sense, but you have to do it in a context of, and I'm also thinking through other things I can do to make this happen, because you have a goal to accomplish with the success of your business. It may be that you have to do a slight tweaking here or there. You might have to slow things down. You might have to get more people on your team, all kinds of different responses. But communicating that to someone effectively is part of the skill that you develop as an entrepreneur, as you talk to different investors. So we're at the end of our time today, Lucas, and I much appreciate you working with me on the hard topic of hard thinking. And I really appreciate how you try to work with your clients to, one, position them to understand how you bring value to the table, but also how you can overcome maybe their thinking process to keep them going in a direction you think is best for them.
Well, I think, Carl, it's important to acknowledge that we're there to help them as much as they want to be helped. And we can try our best, and we can try to achieve the outcome that they're looking to have. And that's how we operate. And we're not successful 100% of the time in making that happen, but we sure as heck go out and try.
Well, thank you for those good words. Thank you, Lucas, for being on the show today. Everyone, you're welcome to come back next week on Tuesday at the same time with a topic and a guest yet to be determined. But we look forward to hearing to you. And for those of you who are still online at this time of day, just to let you know, I will be rappelling off of McGregor Square on Friday as a fundraiser for the Cancer League of Colorado. And it's only 200 feet. And I keep telling people I'm jumping off a building, and then I have to point out I'm on ropes. So I'm all secure. But this is my annual reach out to help Cancer League do what they do. If any of you have nothing better to do on Friday morning at 10:50, come on down to McGregor Square, and I'll be happy to chat with you after I get to the ground slowly. So,
Well, make sure those are good knots. We've got a lot of work to do. We can't lose you.
yeah, no, they bring in the fire department. These guys are all pros, so it's a lot of fun, a little bit of adrenaline rush, but all good. So thank you.